Donald Trump, after all, he said there is a new sort of message from Donald Trump. It's so important. He has to address the nation yesterday, and he did that. And basically, it was nothing new. It was somehow the abstract of what he has been saying so far on his social truths. In on considering all of these posts that he was every day he's posting on his social network on X everywhere. It was some sort of combination of all of them. And one of the messages that he had, which would had some sort of repercussions in Iran, that he said, we're gonna hit you hard back to the Stone Age. And here is what he said, Alex.
Tonight that we are on track to complete all of America's military objectives shortly, very shortly. We're going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong. In the meantime, discussions are ongoing. Regime change was not our goal. We never said regime change, but regime change has occurred because of all of their original leaders' death. They're all dead. The new group is less radical and much more reasonable.
Yeah. Here, what Pete Hex said, again, repeating what Donald Trump said, back to the Stone Age. And the response from, Sayed Majid Musavi, who is the head of aerospace in Iran, IRGC Aerospace, he said, if it is you who are taking your soldiers to their graves, not Iran, who you seek to drag back to the Stone Age. Hollywood delusions have so poisoned your minds that with your paltry 250-year history, you threaten a civilization over 6,000 years old. And you see the way, Alex, how do you see the way Donald Trump is trying to threaten Iran? Because it's not just about what was. You remember the atmosphere before the war started. Iran didn't want to go to this war. They did everything to bring some sort of sanity, negotiations, agreement, But Donald Trump has decided to go with this war, and right now he's repeating the same thing. And nobody, what has changed. What has changed in Iran is that nobody is afraid of what Donald Trump is trying to picture to draw anymore. What do you make of it?
Well, there's two parts to this question, right? One of it is the content of Trump's message, and the second part is the credibility that it gains or it has. So as far as the content of his message is, I think it's very sad to hear, because it's there's a certain obscene vulgarity to it that is completely unnecessary. What is this business of bombing a country into the Stone Age? Why? Why would you do that? Why would you even think that? What has Iran done to you? Nothing at all. So, you just chose to beat somebody up, and then who hasn't provoked you? And then as you beat them up, you're also saying that these are the most evil people in the world. We're going to bomb them to the Stone Age, where they belong. Why should Iranians belong to the Stone Age? What is he saying? That they're Neanderthals? That they're Cro-Magnons? This is so ugly and so unnecessary. It doesn't achieve anything. It appeals to the lowest passions in people who believe him, which is a very, very shrinking segment of the population. And then, as far as his credibility, the percentage of people who actually believe what Trump and Hegseth are saying is smaller and smaller every day. But then, we don't even have to be too abstract about it, because it seems to me that Trump's intention with this is in large part to try to give confidence to markets, because the United States is in a lot of trouble if interest rates continue to rise, and they are rising. I think that about a third or about 30% of US Treasury debt rolls over this year. And if the interest rate, like every 1% interest rate rise adds about $300 billion to the debt burden, to the total debt servicing burden of the United States. So it seems to me that he's trying to boost the confidence of the markets, keep the interest rates low, keep the oil prices low. And I think that that's the whole point of these speeches, because as you noted, he never said anything that was new. But then, what's interesting to look at is how did the markets react to his speech? When he started speaking, I think the oil price was about $102, $103, if I'm not mistaken. It was quite low, low 100s. And then as he spoke, the price went up to 104 something. Well, guess where it is this morning, less than 24 hours after his speech? It's close to $112 a barrel. So obviously the markets don't believe him. Nobody believes him. And so it's his whole dog and pony show is getting very, very counterproductive. And markets are very unforgiving. They don't care. They don't have any ideology. This is collective actions of thousands, hundreds of thousands of market participants who don't care, who make their trading decisions for their own reasons. And they've obviously given the verdict that they don't buy Trump's rhetoric. So I think it was on your podcast a few weeks ago that I said I think that the only way for him to save himself would be radical truth therapy. That is, that he owns up to the disaster that he created. He could say, well, I was listening to Kushner, I was listening to Hegseth and Rubio and Witkoff, and they all gave me very bad advice. Fire them all and say, sorry, that won't happen again. That would be humiliating, but it would be, cutting your losses. You're supposed to cut your losses when you've done something wrong, not double down like a gambler. And he's obviously doubling down as a gambler. Nobody's buying it anymore. The markets are not buying it anymore. And so from here, we can see that oil prices are probably going to go higher. Interest rates are probably going to go higher. And again, oil prices at $112 a barrel may seem high, but I'd like to remind your listeners that they were already at $140 in 2008, and they were at $120 in 2022. So 112 is not particularly high. This could go to 150, it could go to 200. We don't know where this could go, but Trump would be well advised to cut his losses, but he won't. And what he's risking is complete and total catastrophe.
Because part of his plan, he said that he's going to hit the energy grids in Iran. And this could, the repercussions of that sort of attacks on Iran, how Iran would react to the Arab states and Israel, that is hugely consequential for what you've just said. And it seems that he's going to do that, Alex. I think in the next 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to see Donald Trump intensifying the attacks on Iran and the response from Iran. And how do you see as time goes by in a short period of time, do you think it's going to get to 150 in 3 weeks? Or if he intensifies the attacks and the response coming, and you see, I would argue many of these oil and gas facilities would be hit by the strikes if it goes in that direction.
I think it would be impossible to predict this, Nima. Commodities markets are relatively small compared to treasuries and equities, for example, and currencies. These are huge markets. Oil is relatively small. All commodities are relatively small by comparison, and they're very sensitive to liquidity issues. So you could manipulate the price of oil down, and also gold and silver and everything you need to lower the price of, by constricting the liquidity that's available in the markets. The problem is that if you do that, you will get also a big reaction in treasury markets and in the equity market. So the stock market would go down, and the bond market would go down. I mean, the prices of bonds, and then you have a corresponding increase in the interest rates. So they really painted themselves into a corner. So in order to keep markets from crashing, the bonds and stocks and bonds, they need to keep pumping liquidity into them. But that also is raising prices of other things. It's a flood that raises everything. So it's gold's going up, silver's going up, agricultural commodities are going up, and the energy prices are going up also. And so whatever they do, it's going to be bad. There's no good outcome. Before this war started, I said that the only winning move would be just to dump Israel and to leave them to their own devices, to stay out. But for some reason, Trump and his people chose not to. They chose to join Israel, to fight Israel's war for them. And now there's going to really be a hell to pay. And there's no good solutions at all. There really is no good solutions for them. In 2012, the British Ministry of Defense was predicting that the price of oil, due to geopolitical instabilities and energy crisis, that it would go to $500 a barrel. They said that would happen in 2040, 12 years from now, but we don't know. It's impossible to say. One problem with all this liquidity that has been pumped into the market, not just since the war started, but this has been going on practically since 2009. We had quantitative easing. More and more and more money was flooded into the markets. And so they created this enormous amount of liquidity in the so-called shadow banking system. Shadow banking system are financial institutions that have a lot of liquid investable money, but they can't create it like the banks can. They cannot issue loans from nothing. So we're talking about pension funds, about hedge funds, private equity, insurance companies, and so forth, endowments, charities, and so forth. So the total amount of money in the shadow banking system is about $220 trillion. And so if they see the prices of oil going higher, if they get concerned that the prices of energy are going higher, if just a small number of these money managers decide that they want a bigger allocation to crude oil, to natural gas, to things like gold and silver, they can cause a massive spike in those prices. And we have seen over the last 10 years or so that one asset after another, once they gain traction, once they gain popularity, they go almost vertical. One of the last ones was silver, which went from I think it practically quadrupled in 4 years. It went from 20 something to $100 an ounce just a few weeks ago. And oil price of gold more than doubled. We saw things like Nvidia and Tesla stock and Bitcoin and cobalt, palladium. A lot of these things, they have this hockey stick dynamic that once they start moving up, the move tends to accelerate. And I think that the reason is that all this liquidity is sloshing around in the markets, and it is so enormous that once some investment becomes popular, you have a big stampede. So if that happens with crude oil, who knows? Maybe we get to $200 within this year. Maybe we get to 500 in 2-3 years. It's impossible to predict, but this was all unnecessary. This all should not have happened. This will all end up costing enormous amounts of money to people who can least afford it. I think that it will put billions of people at risk of poverty and famine in the world.
Yeah. Alex, we had the CEO of JP Morgan and, Jamie Dimon. He was somehow encouraging Donald Trump to continue this war. It doesn't matter what would be the consequence of this for the market. Here is what he said, Alex.
Market, like the markets are unpredictable, and it's hard for me to tell you exactly what, but I think they're just looking at, is there a chance something can go wrong? Now, we should all hope nothing goes wrong. We should all hope that these bad people are, that we win this thing and clean up the straits, and that Iran is no longer a threat to everybody. And but the markets will be concerned until it's over. But I think it's very important. It's much more important that this be successfully completed than what the market does.
And that sounds like what the UAE and Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states are saying.
Yeah.
Finish this off the right way. They see the urgency here.
Yeah.
Do you?
Yes. I hear some people say, they weren't an imminent threat. A threat means I'm threatening you, I might do something bad. These people have been doing something bad for 47 years. They've been killing people. They've been killing Americans. They funded that terrible Hamas thing. Several Americans were killed on October 7th. And so they've had proxy wars. They've been threatening people. I think people are surprised to find out that had a ballistic missile and go 3,000 miles. These are bad people.
Yeah.
So that's the CEO of JP Morgan. How and why does he weigh in on geopolitical issues? How and why does he get to say that Iranians are bad people? They're killing Americans. Why does the United States have 20-some military bases surrounding Iran? Why? Why are they there? That's not the United States. That's not their neighborhood. The explanation is that banks like JP Morgan have financed development of energy assets in the West Asian region, and the sales of those resources generate revenues for these banks, because their clients like BP and Shell and ExxonMobil and Chevron have loans, have finance. JP Morgan has financed their operations in West Asia, and when their clients repay those loans, that's direct revenue for them. Now, those loans are secured by the natural resource wealth of the region as collateral. And so if the Iranians blow them up, the oil infrastructure, the facilities, the whole shipping infrastructure, then their client's business goes to zero. And then they will not be able to repay those loans. And if those loans cannot be repaid, then they become bad loans, then they become losses. And so the loss of that collateral, the loss of that revenue stream could actually collapse the Western banking system, because the whole system is very fraudulent. It's completely fraudulent. And it's actually like an inverted pyramid, which is balanced on relatively small segment of money good collateral, but then on top of that you hypothecate and rehypothecate, and you build this big giant inverted pyramid that if that money good collateral is removed, the whole pyramid could collapse. And the only way to keep it from collapsing is to print money out of thin air and to backstop all those bad loans. And so obviously, from JP Morgan's and Jamie Dimon's point of view, Iranians are very bad people, because they might have something to say about whether that natural resource wealth in the region belongs to the people of that region, or whether it belongs to Wall Street or the City of London. As far as Jamie Dimon is concerned, obviously it belongs to him. As far as the people in the region are concerned, it belongs to them. Now, if you're able to intimidate them and bludgeon them into submission, where they say, okay, we will be your slaves, we will work for you, but you can take most of the wealth from here, then he's going to say, oh, they're wonderful people, they're Democrats, they are liberal, and all these nice things, they respect human rights and acknowledge all the genders and pronouns and so forth. But if they say, no, this is our wealth, we are going to decide how it's going to be used, then they're obviously very bad, and they should all be bombed and destroyed back to Stone Age. And that's as Jamie Dimon gave away. He said, like, that's more important than the prices and the markets and all these things, because without political control of the region, you lose access to the collateral. And if you lose access to the collateral, then the whole Western system collapses. That is, it's not going to collapse because they in stages, they took complete control of the financial system, especially since the pandemic. And so what that means is that they can, the Fed can print unlimited amounts of money to backstop all these losses and give it directly to the banks. That is, it's not direct because it would be illegal, but they have invented little loopholes and little cutouts that, rather than the Federal Reserve buying the bonds of these failing institutions, they do it through an intermediary. Okay, they kind of made an illegal thing legal if you don't question it too much. But what that means is, like, if you're printing money out of thin air, you're stealing purchasing power from your entire economy, from every person that uses dollars for to earn money, to pay their bills, their pensions, their education expenses, and so what you're doing is you're diluting the purchasing power of the currency that everybody else depends on. And so over time, what you get is inflation, which means that everybody becomes poorer in order for JP Morgan not to fail. So, of course, you could even question, why on earth is Jamie Dimon even on television? Why is he on Fox News? It's because the whole media thing has become a public relations industry. So if Jamie Dimon has to come out to persuade people that war is good, that we should fight this war harder and quicker, well, then the media is there for that, and nobody's going to tell them the story that you and I are discussing here, that this is a horrible idea, that it's unjust, that it's unfair, that it's barbaric, obscene, vulgar, and it's dishonorable. You know, it's very ugly. And maybe if you live outside of that media space, maybe you see just how ugly it is. If you're inside of it, maybe you think like, oh yeah, the Iranians are bad, they're terrible people, this is correct, this is right, we should fight this war. But you know, we've been here before. We've seen all this before. Saddam Hussein was really, really bad, and we had to go fight him. And Bashar al-Assad was killing his own people, so you know, we had to go fight that war. And Muammar Gaddafi was a madman, so he had to go. And you know, Slobodan Milosevic was horrible, we had to go there. The Taliban, terrible, we have to go fight that war. Manuel Noriega, horrible person. Salvador Allende was a communist, that had to be done. It never ends. It never ends. There's always a justification. Every story is its own story. Every war is justified somehow. And you always have a segment of people who think, okay, they lie to us about all these things, but God, you know, when it comes to Iran, I'm sure they're telling us the truth. So yay, you know, let's destroy Iran, and then you know, maybe world will be at peace. Except it won't, because next it'll be Turkey, then it'll be Pakistan, then it'll be China, it'll be back to Russia, and so forth. So this will never end. It'll never end until people say stop and enough. Well, people did say stop and enough, to be fair, and American people, they consistently vote for anti-war candidates. But by now, we should learn the lesson that the whole system is rigged. The system doesn't work. You vote against war, you get more war. So the whole system is broken. I'm sorry to say, but if there's a silver lining in all this, I think that every last person with an IQ above room temperature should understand that the system is broken, that it is impossible to vote your way out.